Hi, sorry, you just caught me grimacing there if anyone sees the beginning of that. It's Sari from Coaching Healthy Minds, and this is the first video. As I promised, I'm going to be doing one of these every Monday evening. And each week, I'm going to be teaching you about the principles and the approach that I use within my coaching, I've used in my own personal life, the idea of managing our lives or understanding our lives, that everything comes from the inside out. So first of all, I'd like to apologise for looking so bedraggled. I think I've talked on one of my other videos about an MRI scan. I've got a problem with my shoulder, and for some reason it's really playing up today, so I can't actually hardly move my right hand. So I can't tie my hair back, so it's in a very scruffy. I had a shower early and it's all, but anyway, I'm sure you don't mind, but just, yeah, I look a little bit worse for wear and I am in a little bit of pain, but I said I was doing this, so I'm doing it. So it might be a bit more short and sweet than I would have ordinarily done, because I can be known to go on a bit. So pop any questions that you've got as I go along, no problem, and I'll try and answer them for you. Just be mindful that this is a closed group, so whatever you post on here wouldn't be able to be seen by anybody that isn't in the group, but obviously I can't control who knows who in the group and things like that. So just be mindful and cautious before commenting. Can't be seen on your main timeline, but obviously, as I say, you know, I think we've all been seeing in the press lately, we can't control really anything on social media. You know, people can see it, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so tonight I thought what I would do is, the reason I've called this stress and overwhelm rather than just specifically anxiety, because to me they're the same thing. And the thing with anxiety is that it's kind of like a very specific label, but these principles and this approach helps us. I mean, I use this approach with couples, I've used it with children, relationships, stress, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, you name it, I use this approach for it. Okay, and so I'm just going to start teaching you a bit about it. Now, those that have done my 1 week anxiety course will already know some of this stuff, but hopefully that will also enrich what it is that you already know. So the inside out approach, can't hear anything. Oh no. How strange. Can anyone else hear? If anyone else is watching, can you let me know if you can hear, just so that I can wonder whether it's your end, Victoria, or mine. Can anyone else hear me? I can hear you. Oh, so one can and one can't. I'll keep going, Vic, and just see if it gets any better. Let me know if you can start to hear. Maybe check the volume on yours as well, in case it's gone off. I'll keep going. Oh, we can now. Oh, good, good. Okay, thanks for shouting out there, Vic. Okay, so yeah, so this is all about the inside out way of looking at things. Okay, so really how our thoughts create our experience of life. You know, we are not passive bystanders in life. Things don't just happen to us. We are creating our own experience and our own personal experience of life and our own reality, moment to moment. Oh, sorry. Moment to moment through our thoughts. Okay. So, and the other thing is that thoughts are transient. They come and they go. One thing that is, you know, whether they're good thoughts, bad thoughts, horrible, irrational thoughts, scary thoughts, thoughts of excitement, thoughts of, you know, sheer joy. The only thing that all those thoughts have in common is that they're not going to stay forever. They're going to go. So thought is extremely, extremely transient. Okay. So yeah, so they all have that one thing in common. So what I want to do is just share a little metaphor that one of my coaches shared with me recently, Nick Bird, who I think she got this originally from Michael Neal. And if anybody has looked into the three principles and the inside out revolution, I suppose, that I'm going to keep talking about, one way of thinking about it is when we have loads of overwhelm and stress, so we have loads of thoughts going on to the point where we're feeling a bit out of our depth. It's almost like we're stood in a room and the lights go out. Okay, so it becomes completely black. and we can't see anything, we can't see anything in front of us. And that can be quite scary. Okay, so if I use myself as an example, when I've experienced really extreme anxiety and overwhelm, and I've been stood in that room, metaphorically, and the light's gone out. Now, the light is going to come back on at some point, but we don't always know when that is, because the light coming on is our innate wellness taking care of us, and we will reset. We will always reset. Because what is creating our anxious thinking or our stressful thinking is our stressful thoughts. Okay, and those stressful thoughts and that stressful thinking is creating our feelings, and that's where the overwhelm comes from. So when I was highly anxious, and at times where I've been really highly anxious, I'm in this room and the light goes out. Now, that room is kind of almost full of thought, really. Now, what I would used to do in that situation, if you stood outside that room and you could hear me inside that room, you would hear so much noise, because I'd probably be screaming, I'd be shouting, again, metaphorically, not, you know, this is kind of the stuff that can go on in your head. I'd be screaming, I'd be shouting, I'd be trying to find my way out of that room, I'd be trying to find the light switch, I'd be so frantic that I'd be bumping into everything, breaking things, crashing into things, possibly hurting myself. You know, I would literally be just in absolute sheer panic that the lights had gone out. And that was very much what it was like for me with anxiety or stress or overwhelm. It can feel like for a lot of people, that feeling of, oh my God, this is scary, I don't like this, what am I going to do? And in a way, the more we do that, the more it feeds it, and the light isn't going to come on. It's almost like, you know, the light's not going to come back on until there's a certain amount of stillness. And if you just stood still in that dark room, as uncomfortable as that would be, it would almost be a bit like, reminds me of, if anyone watches I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, it's almost like when they're in those challenges and they've got snakes and rats and spiders and things crawling around them, and they just lie very still, and the more still they lie, the better it is. The more they start to panic and move around, the more, you know, it gets worse, basically. So the best thing to do in that room when the light goes out is to remain still, because the more still that you are and the less you try and fight and get out and look for the light switch, the sooner the light will actually come back on, because it will always come back on. Okay, it might be that that bulb needs fixing, or, you know, it's on a timer, say, that, you know, has gone off and it is going to come back on, but it will always come back on. And in a way, that's kind of what I do through coaching and want to do through coaching, is in a way coach people to stay still in that room when that light goes off, to not fight it, to not end up, because then that light comes back on. And again, this is metaphorically speaking, but that light comes back on after a severe period of anxiety or stress, and it's almost like, oh God, look at the mess I've made trying to get out of this room. And it's like then spending however long picking up the pieces, like getting my life back on track, getting work back on track, getting my family life back on track. And actually I would have created all that hassle, and the light would have come on sooner had I just stayed still and not completely flapped and tried to fight my way through the darkness, basically. So when we are, I'll give you another little example, and the way that I'm going to explain these things each week to you is going to be through examples, because it is quite, it's not difficult to understand, but it's almost so simple that it's kind of like, oh, you know, how does that work? And it works through us just realizing things as we go through. So one example, my lights went out a couple of days ago, and wasn't for very long, but they went out. What happened was I was out, had a lovely day, went and met with my daughter, a friend, and her daughter and my daughter, who were going to be going to the same school together. We'd actually never met before, so we were meeting in order for the girls to get to know each other, and it was absolutely lovely, and had a really nice time. And then after that, me and my daughter thought, we'll go and do a little bit of shopping and we'll go and treat ourselves. So we went into the shops afterwards and had a wander around and feeling great, and picked up some clothes, and we were in a shop and we're at the till. Now I was feeling absolutely fine up until this point, and I got to the till and things were going through, and all of a sudden, within about 3 seconds, I just felt like I was going to faint. Now it was warm, so I don't know whether it was that or whatever it was, or whether I had a virus or a bug or whatever it is. But at that moment at that till, my vision started to go blur, and I just knew I was going to pass out. Now, the thing is about our innate wellness is that we know what to do in those situations, even when we can't think clearly. So even though my vision was slightly blurry, it was just me and my daughter, so I was worried about her, I just knew what to do, and I knew that I had to sit down. So I looked like a bit of a plonker, but I sat down at the front of the till in the queue because I just knew, my body knew I needed to sit down. So I did that. I was then starting to get a bit of a panic because I was worrying, oh God, I could see the fear in my daughter's face and the panic in her face, and then the overthinking started. But I was still not feeling great. I still felt like I could have fainted. So I stood back up, tried to finish my transaction. I mean, in hindsight, I could have just left, but I wasn't thinking straight, but I just knew I had to sit down. So I got up again, and then after a couple of minutes, again, I was thinking, oh, I really need to sit down. So I sat down again on the floor. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I managed to get my purchase through. I don't know how, it was very much a blur. I couldn't even see the numbers on the pin, but anyway, I did it. Obviously, use it a lot. And we got outside, and as soon as I got some fresh air, I felt slightly better, but I didn't feel that steady on my feet, etc., etc. But I just wanted to get home and get home with my daughter. So I managed to get to the car, managed to feel a lot better once I'd sat down in the car, and then felt okay to drive. So all in all, it was not a long period of time, but it was just quite scary. And there was a lot of thinking going on for me around my daughter and the safety of my daughter, because I didn't want her to panic on my behalf, which kids often will do. So that was that anyway. And I felt fine. I came home and I felt fine. I just had fluids, had a bit of a rest, and I felt fine. And actually, it was at that point that the lights went out for me, because when I reflected on it and I was still thinking about it, I felt quite overwhelmed, really, and quite not scared by it because it had already happened, but there was thought about it. And what if this and what if that? And I realised I got into this cycle of overthinking. So I hadn't realised massively that my lights had gone out, which you don't always, by the way. It's kind of just creeps up on us. And when I actually realised what was going on was quite late on that night. So it must have been about midnight, and I was laying in bed, ready to go to sleep. And then the worry starts to set in, not about what had happened in the day, but lots of other things. And I think what had happened is my worry cycle had triggered through what had happened. And then what we can find, sorry, Miles, really sorry. What can happen is we can then go, I usually talk a lot with my hands and I can't today. What we then do is we'll get into this worry cycle. So then I was worrying about everything that I would normally worry about if I started to worry. And it flitted from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And it went on till about 2 a.m. And the more I tried to fight it by kind of going, oh, I need to get sleep, and if I don't get sleep, I'll feel horrible tomorrow, and I was in that dark room with the lights out, and I was fighting it. When actually, you know what? It was quite understandable that that day I would possibly have a little bit of worry or feel a little bit unsettled because of what had happened, because I didn't really have any answers to what had happened. And that's the thing with worry, is often we're worrying and trying to figure out stuff that we can't get the answer to. I will never get the answer to why I felt like that on that day. I could come up with loads of suggestions, but I'll never really know. And I don't really need to know because it's past. Okay. Now, if it kept happening, say it started happening every day, then I might need to pay attention and think, oh, but actually it happened once. So we can then get caught up in that cycle of, you know, oh, well, why this and why that? And I realised I was doing that evening, and that's why I was still awake till 2 a.m, until I realised exactly what I was doing. I ended up going from all sorts of things that I worried about in the past to then thinking about going back to situations when my dad's passed away to when he was alive, and things that were stressful about all of that stuff, like worrying about stuff that in that moment there was absolutely no need or reason for me to be worried about. I just got into the cycle of worrying from that afternoon. And the way it actually stopped, and I kind of came to realise, is I would just kind of stop myself and thought, what am I doing? What's going on here? I'm just worrying about stuff I don't need to be worrying about right now. And it's not helping, because the more you think things, the more I was thinking things, the worse I felt, and the more agitated I felt, and the less likely I was to fall asleep. So that's again where my mind just kind of kicked in. I was probably just that point, just quiet for a minute. And that's where our minds, the part of us that knows what to do, the part of me that knew to sit on the floor when I felt like that without having to think about it, kicked in when my mind was quiet. And I will talk a lot more about this over the next few weeks. I just had a little thing. I kind of felt, oh, I needed a cuddle. It sounded a bit random, but I felt like I needed a hug. So my husband was in the other room because he'd been out drinking, so he always gets banished to the spare room, and my 10-year-old gets in bed with me. It's quite a treat. We quite like it, really. So he was in the other room, and you know, you could think he'd kill me for this, but I went in and I woke him up and I said, I really need a hug. And I got upset and I had a little cry. And then within about a minute, I thought, oh, I'm all right now. And I went and got in bed and I fell straight asleep, and I had a really great sleep from them. So in that kind of moment of quiet, my wisdom kicked in and my mind told me what I needed. And I needed a little cry, probably because I was scared earlier in the day and it had been a little bit of a stressful afternoon, or a stressful end to what was a really nice time. But I was focusing on the stressful part and not remembering actually that up until that point, we had a really, really great time. So that's just an example again of how we can get caught up in thought. And that's the principles that I now use for myself. The inside out approach is the things that I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and I'll be back at the same time next week. If anyone does have any questions, for those of you that have done my 1-week anxiety course, I can see a couple of you popped up earlier. I'm going to be sending you an email in the next couple of weeks, because one thing I've learned from this run through is that I'd like to spend more time with you, because the thing is about these principles is that they're not that difficult to understand on one level, but you have to keep in the conversation about it. So what I've decided is that from now on, my week's course is going to be at the same price, but it's going to be a month long. And although I don't have the space to answer questions daily and do daily videos, what I will be doing is doing a video each week specifically for those people, and I'll be doing it as like a live Q&A so that you can ask me questions. So what I'm going to do is, for those of you that have finished that 1-week course, in a couple of weeks when I'm ready to get going, I'm going to invite you to come and do the last 3 weeks and keep in that conversation with me. So you'll see it pop up on here, but I've got your emails obviously, and I will be messaging you to invite you to do that. You don't have to do that, but you know, it's a way of keeping in the conversation. It's not going to cost you any extra, and I just want to keep coaching people so that they really get it, because I know that you will get it, and I know that it might take longer for some than others, and it's no indication of intelligence or anything like that. This is not about intelligence. This is just about having insights in your life. So just wanted to mention that for any of you that have already been on, because like I said, I did see a couple of you crop up. So yeah, so I'll leave it there, and I will hopefully see you soon with much tidier hair, because I should have the use of my right hand so that I can actually tie my hair up. Drastic times. But again, another example, like in the past, I would have probably been in bed feeling really awful, wanting to cry because my arm is so painful. It is painful. I can't go online. I can't even tie my own hair up. Big pity party for myself. And I thought, you know, it doesn't matter that I can't tie my hair up. I can look a bit bedraggled. I can still get my point across. It's fine. Okay. So yeah, so hopefully see you all soon. Take care.